Hi everyone, I hope that you're having a great day today. So yesterday we left off talking about how to solve equations that have multiple steps. And the first step was to gather all of our like terms. And then the second step, in that first step we had to move all of our letter terms to one side of the equation by doing the opposite operation. And then the second step was to gather those like terms, so add or subtract them together, so we only had one bundle of letters. And then the third step was to make sure all of our numbers that didn't have letters were on the opposite side of the equation. And our last step was to solve for our letter. Today, we're going to do exactly the same thing, but we're going to start by using the rainbow method, because if you notice in this example, I actually have brackets. So this is how we tackle these problems that have brackets. So remember when we're multiplying out brackets that you have to take the number that's in front of the bracket and multiply it by each term in the bracket beside it. Okay, and we call this the rainbow method. Because we make that pretty little rainbow color, right? So here, if I'm asking you to find the root, let's talk about this because there's some key terms here. Root in math means solve. And solve means that you want to get your letter or variable by itself. Okay, so here, if I'm asking you to find your root, I'm really asking you to multiply it out. So I'm going to do 5 times y first. And there's that invisible 1 in front of that y. So this is really 5 times 1. So this is going to be 5y. And then I have 5 times negative 3, which is negative 15. Okay. Let's look at this next one. So in front of this bracket here, in front of this second bracket, there's actually an invisible 1. Okay, just like everything. So really this is an invisible 1 here. And now we're going to multiply that 1 through the whole bracket. And the reason why we do this is because there's this negative sign. This negative sign outside of the bracket means that we flip all of the signs inside the bracket. Because negative 1 times 1y is negative y. Negative 1 times negative 2 is positive 2. And this whole mess is going to equal 19. Okay, so let's just review that super quick. So before I could get to this step, which looks like what we were doing yesterday, I had to multiply out these brackets. And to do that, I'm going to do 5 times y, which gives me 5y. 5 times negative 3, which gives me negative 15. Negative 1 times y, which gives me negative y. Negative 1 times 2, which gives me positive 2. Okay, those two negatives make a positive. So now this looks like yesterday's, and in fact this looks like part 1 from yesterday's worksheet. So you'll notice that this is kind of a gift because all of my y's are on one side of the equation right now. So I can gather those up. So let's group them together first. So I have 5y. I'm going to ignore the numbers in between, and I'm going to write this negative y right beside my 5y. That leaves me with negative 15 plus 2 equals 19. So I've just rearranged this side so that my letters are beside each other, my numbers are beside each other, and that's okay. And just like we have been doing, you take the sign that's right in front of the number or the letter, and that goes right in front of it still. Those are a pair, they're a unit. So here I can do negative 5 subtract 1y, negative 5y subtract 1y, that's 4y. And I can also simplify this right here. I can do negative 15 plus 2, that's going to be negative 13 equals 19. So now this is looking extra good because this is like what we did 2 days ago, and you guys are getting experts on this. So I want to get my y's by itself on the left-hand side of the equation. So to do that, I need to move over my numbered terms. And to move over my numbered terms, I need to do the opposite operation. So to do that, I'm going to take this negative and I'm going to add it to both sides. So I have 5y subtract 13 plus 13 equals 19. And whatever I did to the left side, I now have to do to the right side, plus 13. Okay. Notice that my negative 13 and my positive 13, or my plus 13, those are going to cancel out. That leaves me with 4y on the left-hand side of the equation. And 19 plus 13 is going to be 31. Yeah, 31. Nope, that's a lie. 33. Just joking. Nope, 32. In between, happy middle. We all make mistakes. Okay, so 4y equals 32. And now I ask myself, what's happening between this 4 and this y? Well, that's multiplication. What's the opposite of multiplication? Division. So I'm going to divide by whatever's in front of that y, which is 4. And if I divided the left-hand side by 4, I have to divide the right-hand side by 4. My 4's cancel because 4 divided by 4 is 1. That leaves me with y. And 32 divided by 4, that's 8. Okay? So again, remember that you can pause and go back to listen. So we're going to approach the next problem exactly the same way that we did, but you're going to notice, and some of you might get a little bit frustrated, that there's brackets on both sides of the equation here. That's okay. It's okay that we're seeing new things. And in fact, we're going to approach it exactly the same way. So we're going to start by multiplying out those brackets. Okay, so we're going to do that distributive rule, which is also the rainbow rule, where we multiply our first number by everything inside of the bracket on both sides of the equation. So let's look at this right now. I'm going to take my 2, I'm going to multiply it by x. That gives me 2x. I'm going to take my 2, multiply it by negative 3. That gives me negative 6. Equal sign goes exactly where it was. And now I'm going to take my negative 3, multiply it by x. That gives me negative 3x. Negative 3, multiply it by positive 5. Negative 3 times positive 5 is negative 15. Okay, that's it for the bracket. So I don't do anything else with my negative 3. And I'm just going to take my negative 6 here, or my subtract 6 at the end, and rewrite it. Okay, so this 6 gets dropped down right here. Now I'm going to collect any like terms. So on my right-hand side of the equation, I have 2 numbered terms that I can combine. Nothing else on either side. So I'm just going to rewrite the 2 equations super quick. And before I finish this last step, I'm actually going to condense these. So I'm going to do negative 15 subtract 6. And negative 15 subtract 6 is actually negative 21. Okay? So I have to go back to what we were doing yesterday. So I need to actually move all of my x's to one side of the equation. And I start by asking myself, which side has the most amount of x's? So here I have 2 x's, and on my right-hand side I have negative 3 x's. And I know 2 is bigger than negative 3. So I'm going to move all of these ones over. Okay? And so before I can do that, I need to look at the sign. So to undo a negative, I'm going to end up adding. So I have 2x minus 6, and I'm just going to leave a space for a second. Negative 3x. To undo my negative 3x, I'm going to add 3x. And then I'm just going to put in that negative 21. And if I added 3x on the right-hand side, now I'm going to add it on the left-hand side. Okay, so if I'm looking at my right-hand side of the equation right here, my negative 3x and my positive 3x are going to cancel each other out. This leaves me with negative 21 on my right-hand side of my equation. And then if I'm looking over here, I can actually collect this 2x and this plus 3x. And I can add those together. 2 plus 3 is 5. So that leaves me with 5x's minus 6. And now this is looking like any other equation that we've seen. So I'm going to start. I want my letters to stay on this side. And I'm going to move my numbers to the right-hand side of the equation. So to get rid of negative 6, I have to add it. Okay, so I have 5x subtract 6 plus 6 equals, if I did that to my left-hand side, now I have to do it to my right-hand side. Negative 6 and plus 6 are going to cancel. That leaves me with 5x. Negative 21 plus 6. Sorry, it's actually negative 15. Okay, so now I'm left with 5x equals negative 15. And I'm going to ask myself, what's happening between this 5 and this x? Well, we said multiplication. So to undo multiplication, I'm going to divide. So I divide both sides by 5. Okay. 5 divided by 5 is 1. That's going to leave x on my left-hand side. And negative 15 divided by 5, that's going to leave me with negative 3. Okay, so I have a solution here, but how do I know that this is actually right? And one of the things I can do is called substitute and check. So in order to substitute and check, I'm going to take my x that I have and I'm going to replace it in my original equation. And to do this, we're going to break this down into my left and my right hand side. So if you look back at my original equation at the very top of this page, my left hand side was 2 bracket x minus 3. So that's what I'm going to start with on my left hand side. And on my right hand side, it was negative 3 bracket x plus 5, close that bracket off, minus 6. Okay, so what we're going to do here is every time I see an x on the left-hand side of my equation, I'm going to replace it with negative 3, and I actually have a special term for this. This is called substitution. And like I said, so we're going to substitute x equals negative 3 into the equation, and substitution is just a fancy word for replacing, okay? So this is how this is going to go. I'm going to rewrite my 2, my bracket, and instead of this x now, I'm going to put in the number negative 3. And then I'm going to write my subtract 3 and my bracket. Now, and I'm going to put equal signs in between the right and the left-hand side. Now I'm going to do order of operations. So I'm going to do the inside of the bracket. So negative 3 subtract 3, negative 6, and my 2 goes in front of it. 2 times negative 6 is negative 12. I can't do anything else with that left-hand side. I'm just going to leave that negative 12 there for a second. Let's move on to our right-hand side. I'm going to do exactly the same thing. Okay, so I'm going to do negative 3. That's my number outside my bracket. And now instead of my x, I'm going to put negative 3 plus 5 minus 6. Negative 3 plus 5, which is inside my bracket, that's going to give me 2 minus 6. Negative 3 times 2 is negative 6. Subtract 6. Negative 6 subtract 6, that's negative 12. So now if I'm looking at this, I know negative 3 is a solution because my left-hand side, which was negative 12, equals my right-hand side, which was negative 12. So this is good. Check mark, oops, check mark, math smiley face. Okay, so that's the end of today's lesson. Please make sure to go back and rewind and kind of have another listen if you need to. Send me emails to check in. There will be an assignment at the end of this week. I'm going to post it tomorrow. It's going to be real simple. It's basically just a check-in. So you're going to explain one thing that you learned to me this week. You're going to show me one question, and I will give you a list that you can do, a full solution, and one question that you couldn't do. And again, I will give you a list of those things. So super, super simple. Keep checking in, and I hope that you guys are all doing well. Miss you all.